Welcome back for another week of the Jeff Tate Sports Podcast. Episode 70 here, and I have a special few episodes coming up planned for you guys. Once again, apologies for missing some podcasts last week. I was helping a family member build a deck, and there wasn't many sports topics to talk about after the huge Imani Bates news that came on Monday. But for the next few weeks, I am unveiling our college football conference previews. We have the ACC, Big 12, Big 10, SEC, and Pac-12 conference previews with my good friend Cole. And we filmed half of these already, and I'm extremely excited for them. Please rate, review, subscribe to this podcast. These should be our highest viewed podcast because a lot of hard work went into these, a lot of time, and a lot of knowledge went into these. I appreciate my good friend Cole for helping me with this, and hopefully you guys enjoy. So first up today for episode 70 is the ACC Preview podcast. We're recording this on Monday, July 6th. This is the first installment of the college football conference previews with my good friend Cole. Today we have the ACC Preview coming to you guys, and from my thoughts about what I see the ACC being is I think it's Clemson's conference. 6th straight year, I believe they're going to win the conference. That's just kind of how it is. Cole, do you have any other thoughts with that? Like, is it Clemson's conference to win?
Yeah, I think it's Clemson's to lose, actually. And I think the conference will be a lot better than it has been in the past. They have kind of been the worst Power 5 conference in the past 2 to 3 years, with barely having 2 ranked teams, if that. I think that teams like North Carolina and Virginia Tech could surprise some people this year, and I think they could have about at the max 4 to 5 ranked teams, so it could be a huge jump from last year.
Yeah, you look at it from last year, and Virginia was the next best record. Clemson went 8-0 in the conference, dominated. There wasn't many close games in the conference. Virginia kind of came out of nowhere, went 6-2, and they're your next best team. So in a lot of conferences, you see an 8-0, a 7-1, maybe 2 teams that are like that. So when I look at this team or this conference from a Player of the Year perspective, I see it as being a 3-horse race. I'm going to bounce some names off. Obviously, we all know about Trevor Lawrence. He is likely to be the top quarterback taken after this year in the NFL draft. I like another quarterback in Sam Howell from North Carolina. Had a very good year last year. And then you look at a running back like Travis Etienne. So are those kind of the same people you're thinking of in terms of dominating the conference in terms of the Player of the Year award?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the only 3 that I think those are the clear favorites. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence number 1. I think Etienne number 2, and Sam Howell is Etienne and Howell are probably just right there, 2A and 2.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we divided the conference up. I have the Atlantic Division, and when I going team by team, I will ask you for some quick thoughts about that team. And we kind of split it up. So I did all the Atlantic and mainly focused on them, and Cole did the coastal part of the ACC. So I'm going to start with the Atlantic. And the first team we have up is Boston College. And Boston College moved on from legendary coach there, I would say. Steve Adazio's been there a while, and hired the young, talented mind of Jeff Haley coming from Ohio State. I am very impressed with Jeff Haley. He led an Ohio State defense last year that was one of the best in the FBS, and I think he has what it takes to make Boston College a contender in the ACC. Now, that's not this year. That's just not going to happen. They have one of the better running backs, I would say, in the conference, in David Bailey. Rushed for just under 900 yards, and that was behind A.J. Dillon, who we all know was one of the better running backs in college football last year, and now has moved on to the Green Bay Packers. I look at this team, and I believe they're headed for the bottom of the ACC this year. Anything from 8 to 10 in the conference, I would say, is a success for them. Do you kind of have any thoughts on Boston College? Just some quick do you see them having a much better year than I do? We are going to get to standings at the end of all of our breakdowns of each team. But kind of what do you see from Boston College?
Yeah, I think Boston College is kind of right where you have them. They do have a pretty tough schedule, but I like their coach, and I think he could bring some hope and a different culture to the team. So
next up, and like I said, the favorite, kind of a favorite to win the national championship even, and that's Clemson. And Clemson, they are very lucky to have Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne for another year after Lawrence threw for 3,600 yards last year and Etienne ran for over 1,600 yards. You look at Clemson and you know they're going to have talent. They recruit the best in the ACC. They're a top 5 recruiting class almost year in and year out. When I look at them next year, I do think it's going to be a huge a huge drop-off not having Justin Ross. Justin Ross is an outstanding receiver who, if you remember in the championship game, had that outstanding one-handed catch and really looked poised to be a first-round draft pick. Well, he hurt his neck and will be out all season. So I really am interested to see what they do with him. Their defense has first-round talent all over, from guys like Xavier Thomas to linebacker James Skolaski. Very talented team here. They do have a tough game at Notre Dame, November 7th. So hopefully we have a normal non-conference schedule and that game gets to get played, because it should be phenomenal. So any quick thoughts about Clemson? I know you kind of just said they're the favorite. They're who should win.
Yeah, they're who should win. Clear favorites. It's theirs to lose.
So now my next team, and Florida State is one of the most interesting teams in the ACC. Willie Taggart was absolutely horrible. He went 9-12 overall in his first 2 years with Florida State, and I just think he's not a good coach. And they got a good new coach, Mike Norvell, coming from Memphis. You look at him, and he has a very offensive-minded approach, and that's good for Florida State because you have some talented guys on offense. James Blackman looks to be a decent quarterback for that system as a junior. I look at him. He's throwing to some very talented receivers that are up there at the top of the ACC. This team will have a tough job in replacing Cam Akers, who's a second-round draft pick. But all in all, I think this team's headed for kind of top of the ACC, but not quite contending. I think they're a year or two away. They need good recruiting classes to get back to what Florida State was when Jameis Winston was there. So, I mean, you got anything to add to me on that?
Yeah, I think Florida State is going to surprise some people this year, be a lot better than last year. You see it a lot with teams that are historically good when they're playing terrible. They hire a new coach, usually that first year after. Their record increases by like 2 or 3 or 4 wins. So I think that's what's going to happen this year. They'll get probably 2 or 3 more wins than last year.
So next on my list is Louisville. And Louisville surprised a lot of people last year, going 8-5. It's the second year with Scott Satterfield, who left from Appalachian State. I really like what he did with them last year. They looked pretty good in the opener against Notre Dame, which kind of showed you what he's trying to build there. They have one of the best running backs in the conference, if not the country. If Travis Etienne wasn't in the conference, he would be the number 1 running back, and that is Javian Hawkins, who's actually only a sophomore, so you're going to get at least another year of him. Last year, over 1,500 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns. I really like what he's going to do. I see this team also being a lot like Florida State in a way that I think they're towards the top of the ACC, but not contending. Cole, do you have anything to note on some of those talented guys that we have here at Louisville?
Nothing really to note on them, but I would say keep an eye out, watch out for the second-year Blues under the head coach, because sometimes a lot of teams will perform that first year, like I said about Florida State, but the second year there'll be a little drop-off maybe. So watch out for that with Louisville, or they could just keep going up.
So NC State's my next team, and they're interesting because they were 4-8 last year, 1-7 in the ACC, and NC State's usually not at the bottom of the ACC. They're usually up towards the top, kind of contending, kind of not. And I think this is going to be a mediocre year for them. Peyton Wilson leads a defense that ranked towards the bottom of the ACC last year, and he needs to improve on that for this team to contend in the ACC. Pretty weak non-conference schedule. They do have Mississippi coming to Raleigh early in the season. But when I look at this team, kind of mediocre. I mean, do you see mediocre or?
I see last in the conference out of them.
Okay, so
I think Dave Dorn is going to crumble under the pressure of being on the hot seat, and I don't think the QB is very good either.
He does have another year on the hot seat, and some coaches just can't handle that. So Syracuse up next, and Syracuse is going into their 5th year with Dino Babers, and Syracuse, decent quarterback, Tommy DeVito. He had an all right year, 2,300 passing yards, 19 touchdowns. When I look at him, I see average, and I see average with Syracuse. I don't think they're going to have a great year. Kind of tough non-conference schedule. Got to go at Rutgers, at the Western Michigan Broncos, who I have a special place in my heart for. I think it will be an interesting year for Syracuse. They do have one of the better defensive backs in Andre Sisco, who leads FBS currently in interceptions. So are you kind of in alignment with me on this?
Yeah, I think they could be just pretty average. See what Tommy DeVito has developed into over the offseason and see if their new coordinators will do anything for them.
So Wake Forest is my final team in the Atlantic part of the division. And I do want to get Cole's thoughts on them because he did tell me they're one of his surprise teams. I think they're going to have a decent year. I have them at 6-6. We'll get to the standings, obviously, later in this. Sam Hartman is the quarterback now. No more Jamie Newman. He's gone, transferred to Georgia. Sam Hartman, many of you might know, QB1 star from Netflix's series. And I like Sam Hartman a lot. I think he has a very good arm. I just think it's a tough conference, and you don't really know what you're getting with this defense. A lot of returners are coming back, but they weren't one of the better defenses in the conference last year. I do like receiver Sage Surratt, who received for over 1,000 yards last year and should give Sam a good guy to throw to. So, Cole, what are you kind of thinking with Wake Forest here?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the perfect storm. Like you said, they have a lot of returners. They're not really on anyone's radar, so their defense could improve a lot with just another year under their belt. They've made 4 consecutive bowl trips for the first time in Wake Forest ever. They've never done that before. So they're on the up and up right now, and I think this is just kind of the perfect storm for them this year, where they'll be like Syracuse was 2 years ago or Virginia was last year, where they rack off like 9 wins, 8 wins, and surprise some people and maybe make it to a conference championship, but probably not because Clemson's in their way.
Okay, so I got my part of the Atlantic done. I know I went into pretty deep there. You're going to start us off with the Coastal Division, and who are you going to start us with?
I'm going to start with Georgia Tech. Now, I expect Georgia Tech to take a pretty big leap this year. Just because after Paul Johnson retired, the classic triple option, always running the ball, not a lot of shotgun, Jeff Collins took over, and he went a lot more shotgun, a lot more spread, a lot more passing, and that's going to take some getting used to. And last year they had a tough year, but I think a second year under him, they're going to be more used to that, and I think they're going to be increase their win total by about like 2 or 3 from last year. So I do kind of like Georgia Tech. Jeff, what do you think about them?
So I look at them, and according to ESPN, 10 returning starters on offense. That's huge, especially when you're instilling a new game plan, when you have a whole new philosophy. And I'm interested to see what James Graham does. He's a sophomore quarterback, should be the starter coming into next year. And yeah, I kind of think I have them towards the bottom of the conference. I think you do too, but you see a little more improvement than I do. So
next, I'm going to go over to Virginia. I think Virginia is just going to have a major drop-off. They're going to have a tough time replacing Perkins. They got a few guys there that they're going to have a battle for the starting job. And I think they're going to be a lot like Syracuse was last year, because Syracuse had a pretty big year 2 years ago. The next year, they kind of went back to average and who they were, a little below average. I think that's what Virginia's going to do. They had a good year last year, but it's just going to be too hard to replace Bryce Perkins.
Yeah, Bryce Perkins, that is not an easy guy to replace. Last year alone, 33 touchdowns. Watched him a lot. They went 9-5, 6-2 in the ACC. They even played Clemson for the conference. You look at them, and I think they have some talent, but I don't think they have the right people at the right place. Like, you need a quarterback that's experienced to have another good year like he did last year, and I just don't see it.
Yeah. So next team I have Duke. Now Duke, they don't really have a good QB. I don't love their coach. They finished the season last year really poorly, so it's not like they're coming into the season with some momentum. They don't really have a lot of momentum. I think they're a pretty below average team, and they're going to finish near the bottom of the conference. That's pretty much all I see out of them.
So I do notice, and I don't know if he's the name starter. Obviously, we'll get into this real quick. A lot of these positions at like quarterback, running back, we don't know who the starters are indefinitely because there wasn't spring ball. We didn't have spring games. We didn't get to watch all of that preseason info. So when you look at this team, Chase Bryce, transfer from Clemson, looks to be the starting quarterback if you had to bet on anybody. And Chase Bryce showed some things with Clemson, but he doesn't have the talent that Clemson does. So I see Duke kind of mediocre in the ACC this year.
So next I'm going to do Miami. Now Miami I don't love, but I think they have the talent to get them a lot of wins. The reason I don't love them is because last year it's usually under a new coach, things starting to tighten up a little bit, and you really kind of see like the best of what the coach will offer, I think. And Manny Diaz, he's a lot of energy, a lot of good things about him, but the team was so undisciplined. There was a lot of penalties, a lot of stupid mistakes, and that's just not something you want to see under a first-year head coach. So like I said, they have a bunch of talent. They got, can't remember, what's the quarterback's name? Freshman last year.
Oh, well, so we'll get into this real quick. They have a transfer from Houston, De'Aaron King, who is believed to be the starter. The other guy they lost, I don't know his name, something Williams, who started most of the year. Jaron Williams, he started most of the year. He's gone. And Cozy, his name's weird. N'Kosi Perry. It's either him or De'Aaron King for the starter.
So their quarterback situation could be pretty good. Like I said, they do have a lot of talent. Defenses are usually good, but just a lot of undisciplined, a lot of mistakes that shouldn't be made. And that's why I see them getting wins based on talent, but I don't see them taking the next step to winning the Coastal Division and making it to the conference championship because of that undiscipline.
Yeah, they have one of the better tight ends, I would say, in the country, definitely in the conference, in Brevin Jordan. He actually, for those of you that watched QB1, he played with Tate Martell. Tate Martell is also still on this roster. He's not going to probably play because it's Tate Martell. He's a lot of hype out of high school, but I'm with you, Cole. I think this team has a lot of talent. When you're at the U, you can recruit. Guys want to play for you, but you got to be able to instill discipline.
So my next team is Pitt. Now, last year, Pitt's defense was the best of Coach Pat.
We ran into some technical difficulties there. Cole's going to continue about Pat Narduzzi and the Pittsburgh Panthers.
So, yeah, Pat Narduzzi last year had the best defense he's ever had since he's been the coach there. Held teams to 4.5 yards per play, so and 22.5 points per game. So they had a really, really good defense. Now they do have a couple of holes to fill at linebacker, and they have to replace cornerback Dane Jackson. But there's a good chance this defense could be even better. However, I still don't see. I just see them as just a classic Pittsburgh team where they upset some teams. Give teams like Clemson or Notre Dame a run for their money, but and then they'll lose some games they shouldn't. And I think it's just going to be a classic, just average Pittsburgh team. But hey, they could surprise us this year. Their defense could be even better than last year, and I kind of like the Pittsburgh Panthers, but not enough to put them at the top or anything like that. But what do you think, Jeff?
So one of the interesting stats out of the Pittsburgh Panthers, as I'm calling them, is Kenny Pickett, quarterback, coming back for another year. He threw for 3,100 yards and only had 13 touchdowns. I think that's pretty bizarre. You look at this team, 10th in the ACC in total offense, so they don't like to score, and that's Pat Narduzzi's thing. He's a defensive mind. They were the third best defense we have in the ACC, so I kind of like what you said there. A mediocre Pittsburgh season where they're going to scare that top team, but they're going to lose a game that they probably shouldn't.
All right, so my next team, I'm doing North Carolina, and I think North Carolina could have a great year. 10 returning starters on offense, including Sam Howell, who threw for 3,700 yards and 38 touchdowns. And they have star receivers Diami Brown and Daz Newsome. And this team could just be just elite. Could be a great team. Could definitely, I think, if anyone's going to challenge Clemson, it's North Carolina, maybe Virginia Tech. But I think North Carolina has the best chance, the most talent to challenge for the top. And I really like North Carolina. Like we said, we have Sam Howell as one of our favorites to win Player of the Year in the conference. So I really like North Carolina. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, you look at this team and Mac Brown. I mean, the guy's in his 32nd year coaching at the collegiate level, and he's such a good coach. I love this team on paper. 10 offensive starters returning, 7 on defense. Tough schedule, I'm not going to lie. Non-conference is tough. Their first game at UCF, and then they play Auburn at the Mercedes-Benz Dome there in Atlanta, and that's not easy. That's not an easy start to your season, but you get through that, split those 2 games. I think the ACC goes relatively easy for the Tar Heels.
Yeah, we'll learn a lot after that Auburn game for sure about who North Carolina is going to be. My last team is Virginia Tech. The Hokies, they have a clear QB, which is huge. Their QB is
Hendon Hooker.
Yeah,
it's got a cool name.
Yep, he is going to be. I think he'll be pretty good. Just improved from last year. And they have a good running back room and a great coach in Justin Fuente. I really like Justin Fuente, and I think this team will be. I think it's gonna be Virginia Tech and North Carolina challenging for the top spot of that Coastal Division, and it's going to be, I think that's what's going to make the ACC actually enjoyable to watch this year, those 2 teams, because we know Clemson's going to be good. It's going to be those other teams that we don't know are going to be good or not. It's going to be fun to watch those teams. And, yeah, what do you think? What do you see in Virginia Tech this year?
I like Virginia Tech. I have them in North Carolina contending for the Coastal Division. Tough game, week 2. Penn State comes into Blacksburg, and we'll see a lot what they are going to do if they can beat Penn State, because Penn State looks very elite. We will get to them when we do our Big Ten preview later. But so wrapping up this part of the
Virginia
ACC
Tech's a tough
preview,
place to play too.
Yes, we hope they can have the full arena, the full crowd going crazy, because Ohio State went there a few years ago and had some difficulties. So now that we've given all of our kind of breakdown of each team, I want to go through some standings. We both have the same top team. We've mentioned Clemson as both of our top teams. How about you give your 2 worst? And did you do record? If you didn't do record, that is okay. Who's your worst team and record? Kind of what's their record looking like?
Our worst team is NC State, and I think they'll be 2-10. I think they're gonna have a bad year. Coach will get fired, and they're gonna have to restart.
Perfect, because I have NC State at the 7th team in the conference. I have them 6-6. 3-5 in the conference. I just look for them to have a little bit of a bounce back from a 4-8 season, but I could definitely see it going Cole's way and them being the worst team in the conference. I have Boston College as the worst team at 3-9 overall, 0-8 in the conference. Jeff Haley has a tough job this first year. He's got to replace a lot of key players, and I just think it's hard to do in your first year. Mm-hmm. So after NC State, do you have a team close to them at the bottom, or is it still like a few games?
I think Duke's right there with them at 3-9. I don't see them doing much this year at all.
Perfect, because I have Duke at 6-6. Have the middle of the road, a lot like NC State. My second worst team is Georgia Tech, who I know Cole's higher on. He mentioned that in his breakdown. New coach, second year, new playing style. Like, that's a huge thing, going from the triple option to just a standard offense that's not running every time. And so I have Georgia Tech 2-10, 1-7 overall. I still think they need another year to recruit all the players for that individual system. So, Cole, give me a team that you think is going to have just a better year than what you're kind of hearing. And we'll both give one of those teams. Maybe we have the same team.
Well, like I said earlier, I have Wake Forest as I'm really high on them. I really think that they're gonna finish about around 4. They're gonna be challenging 4th or 5th, maybe 3rd in the conference power rankings. I really like them. I like their quarterback. I like their culture right now. Like I said, they've made it to 4 consecutive bowl games. I like them. I like them a lot.
And that's huge for a team like Wake Forest that doesn't get to a lot of bowl games. My surprise team is Louisville, and I just like the talent there. Javian Hawkins, like I mentioned, that is a stud running back in his second year. And I also like Mikael Cunningham at quarterback. I just see Louisville being that kind of surprise team in the conference. So this will wrap up our ACC preview for this upcoming college football season.